better way to start the day than with breakfast, and for hundreds of people at Torres, that was the Australia Day breakfast in the town's Bettles Park. It was a hearty Australian-style breakfast, and when the eating was out of the way, there were a host of other activities to mark the occasion. As you may expect, there was an Australian bush band for entertainment and dancing. As well as the food, stalls were handing out native Australian saplings and all sorts of Australian souvenirs and flags. There was the official side of the day, with the naming of the Citizens of the Year, Brett Fairclough and Margaret Hepplewhite, as well as the naturalisation ceremony. Hundreds of people turned out, but it seemed to be the youngsters who really enjoyed the occasion. At Maitland, the official Australia Day celebration was the traditional procession from St Paul's Church to the Maitland War Memorial. Leading the procession was Maitland's Mayor, Pat Hughes, who was accompanied by a number of local Hunter parliamentarians. The procession was patronised by people from all sorts of groups, some who were celebrating our country's origins and others our past. Among the marchers today was Maitland's Twink Story, who was honoured on the Australia Day list and awarded the Order of Australia. As with thousands of other Australia Day ceremonies nationwide, local dignitaries presented speeches recounting our humble beginning and development. It was also a chance to renew the call for national unity. Down on the Central Coast, the celebrations were far less formal, with hundreds flocking to Terrigal for a day of entertainment and simply enjoying the outdoors. For the youngsters, Australia Day at Terrigal was a day of fun, with all sorts of activities to pass the time. The highlight of the day, though, will be happening shortly before sunset, when the spectators should be dazzled by the community arts project Homage to the Elements. Using the rock shelf area around the Skillion, the performance will incorporate all the natural beauty of the area with a dance, music and theatrical extravaganza. For thousands of people all along the coast though, Australia Day 86 was a day spent enjoying the sun and water at the beach. If it was just for the day or for the whole weekend, many are using the time just to get away from it all. On Lake Macquarie as well, the campers and holiday makers were out in force enjoying the great Australian outdoors.
Went in with one win each. The Americans took the first test comfortably enough, went down to a very determined Australian foursome in the return match. It was a tightly run affair with many verbal and tactical clashes between the two sides. But the American Eagles, led by 2 after the very first innings, held that margin for 4 more before leading by 4 points at the halfway mark. Some rather wild driving in the second half held things up as cars took the brunt of some heavy bumps. Before the Eagles finally won by 10 points, 41 to 31.
Ron Pine hangs on for second. John Pine is third.
In the Superbike Grand Prix, the Sydney rider Ray Palmer sprung a mild surprise by leading from go to woe to beat a hot field. Second was English rider Sean Wilmot, with many times Australian champion Chris Watson forced to settle for third.
Second place goes to Sean Wilmot.
The spirit of Australia Day was obvious at Spears Point Park, where thousands turned up today for the Lake Macquarie Council Australia Day Festival. People from all walks of life turned up. The Newcastle Cycleways movement arrived in characteristic fashion after a ride to Spears Point from the International Sports Centre. Member for Charlestown, Richard Face, was there, escorted by his clan, the Lake Macquarie Police Youth Club Pipe Band. For most people, it was just a fun day in the park. For the youngsters, there was the usual selection of sideshow rides and stalls, and there was plenty of live entertainment with bands, theatre groups and even a skydiving display. On the official side of the celebration, over 25 people became Australian citizens at a naturalisation ceremony conducted by Lake Macquarie Mayor Jeff Pasterfield and member for Shortland Peter Morris. The festivities will continue until 9 o'clock tonight, when it all winds up with a fireworks display. The feature of the State 125 titles being staged by the Spears Point Club was that the top 3 places were taken up by Sydney boats, with local boats shut right out of the picture. Going into today's final round, Flying By, skippered by Phil Scott from Sydney's Byra Club, was leading the event and looked set to take the title. Shortly behind him was another Byra boat, Petrel, sailed by Murray Walters. Back on points but still in contention was Night Shift from Sydney's Penrith Club. A tight tussle developed at the head of the field in today's race, with those 3 boats battling it out for the places. Petrel made best use of the conditions and crossed the line first, just ahead of Night Shift and Flying By third. But the win was not enough, and the placings overall were Flying By, Petrel and Night Shift.
The accident happened on Ogilvy's Hill, 9 kilometres east of Denman, when the driver in a Holden utility lost control of the vehicle. The ute skidded into the path of a Volvo station wagon travelling down the hill towing a caravan. The passenger in the utility was 25-year-old Perry William Bell, a mechanic from Aberdeen. The force of the impact crushed the cabin, killing him instantly. The 4-member family travelling in the Volvo were all transported to hospital. The 33-year-old mother, Nolene Johnson, was taken by helicopter to Royal Newcastle Hospital with a broken leg and arm. Her husband, Maxwell Johnson, and their 2 children were only slightly injured. The driver of the utility escaped with minor injuries, and police say that although further investigations are taking place, he is at this stage believed to be at fault. Meanwhile, police report a quiet weekend on the Pacific Highway. 28 extra patrol vehicles from Sydney were called in, and police say they are pleased with the outcome of the Blitz exercise.
next couple of days.
17-year-old Emma Halliday will spend the rest of this year at the Institute furthering her sport of hockey, despite her outstanding HSC mark of 439 out of 500. Newcastle is the third largest women's hockey area in the state. Emma will become the first girl from this area to be invited to attend the Institute. She's been a state under-18 representative for the past 2 years and a member of the Australian under-18 talent squad. She agrees a year at the AIS should provide a big boost to her hockey career.
Yeah, I can't wait. I was over there a month ago and had a taste of it while I was there, and the coaches are wonderful over there. They're really helpful.
Well, what can you expect?
Well, hopefully a great improvement in my game and further my representation in state and Australian levels.
Well, how far do you intend to go? Perhaps 1988?
Oh, the Olympics, yeah, I'd love it. It's a bit of a dream at the moment though.
Emma, for many young sportsmen and women, it's a problem to get away to places like the Institute because of their jobs. Have you got any job prospects as well that you may have to defer?
Only really uni. I just finished my HSC, so it's really a good time for me to be going away because I can just defer for the year.
And what maybe would you be doing at university?
Well, I got an aggregate high enough to do medicine, so maybe that.
Well, certainly you've been very successful on the sporting field and academically, but at least for the next few years, is hockey going to be your number one priority?
Yeah, I think so.
They came on foot, by private transport, and even hire car to make it to school on day one of the school year. These students at Aboriginal High School were doing what more than 20,000 others throughout the region were doing without private bus transport. Yesterday, there were 300 or so local private bus drivers expressing fear that unless they protested, they stood to lose their jobs as a result of the government cuts to private operators. Drivers who stopped work certainly did affect the community.
Has there been much inconvenience for you?
Fair bit. A lot of people have had to walk.
Yes. In other cases, I suppose the parents have had to bring you.
Yeah.
Were the parents a little bit dissatisfied with having to bring you to school this morning?
Yeah. Because this costs more money for petrol and everything.
However, it also
I suppose as far as you're concerned,
Alan Beard, assuring parents that the confusion over bus passes will be clarified within 2 weeks.
We'll have been in contact by then with every parent who was affected by this change, and they'll all know who was entitled to free travel.
Comment from a mother.
Yes, it certainly was a family affair today, with even Big Sister on the job, escorting her little relatives to school.
It was also a special day for one little girl who went back to school today. Sydney bone marrow girl Alicia Capel went back to school for the first time since her life-saving transplant 5 months ago. Doctors had given 6-year-old Alicia only a 35% chance of survival after the operation. She can now lead a normal life.
For 80-year-old Bert Bartley, the sport of bowling has played a major part in his life. So has his association with the Adamstown Bowling Club. He joined the club 50 years ago, and today a special luncheon in honour of the golden anniversary was given by the club members. Former president of the Australian Bowling Association, Harold Gillard, was there to highlight Bert's involvement and contribution to the sport in Newcastle. Out of the 53 years of the club's operation, Bert has served as president for 15 and remembers back to the club's humble beginnings.
I've seen it grow, as I said, from a cricket pitch to a small wooden clubhouse, and then from a wooden clubhouse with a 9-ring green in front of it. I've seen it expand to 3 greens and a little 2-ringer on the end. I've seen the old clubhouse pulled down and the new one built. I happened to be in the chair then. And it wasn't too long before we had to alter that. Our membership was getting that great.
You've had 50 years to practice your bowling. How would you rate your style today?
Well, I still enjoy my bowls, let's put it that way.
The success of the Magna coincides with a major expansion program by one of Newcastle's biggest car dealers. Crossroads Mitsubishi expects a boost to sales following the Magna's award, and will build a new $250,000 showroom and office complex on this site to cope with the extra customers. The new headquarters will join a large new service area already under construction at a cost of $200,000. Crossroads is already the second biggest Mitsubishi dealership in the state and is aiming at number
1. Don't be dumb is a catch cry you'll be hearing a lot more of in the near future. It's a new driver safety campaign, hot on the heels of the very successful drink driving campaign. It stands for driving under medication, a very serious problem and one that the state government is out to correct. This battered Kimura will be the weapon. People taking prescribed and over-the-counter drugs, the targets.
We know that $300 million worth of prescribed and over-the-counter drugs are sold every year in New South Wales. We also know that 1 in 10 road accident victims have had medications measured in their tissue at Sydney University.
Rhys Jordan and the member for Newcastle, Ned Wade, launched the Dumb is Dangerous campaign locally by saying the problem was too big to ignore. In a 3-pronged attack, there'll be an extensive media push, and as well doctors, surgeries and chemists will carry literature pointing out the dangers of driving while under the influence of drugs. The Minister for Health will also legislate to have warnings put on all potentially dangerous medications. According to the Traffic Authority, of the $300 million worth of drugs sold annually, almost half of the 32 most popular ones have been proven to impair motor coordination and driving ability.
Simple things like cough mixtures, antihistamines, antidepressant drugs like Valium, some sleeping pills like Mogadon can have quite serious motor impairment problems. if you're taking any sort of medication at all, ask your chemist or your doctor what sort of effects these can have on your driving. And also ask your doctor, if I take these medications and I have a drink, what's the effect on driving?
The normally placid retirement area of Summerland Point woke up on Thursday morning to the sounds of earth-moving machinery. Workmen had begun excavating the foreshore property of Sydney businessman George Adams. Nearby residents are indignant, saying the earthworks are upsetting the environment of the locality. They rang Wyong Shire Council to complain, only to find the council knew nothing of the development. Today, Council Health and Building Surveyor Greg Kenyon inspected the work and explained to locals that Mr Adams had approval from the Lands Department to construct a new boat ramp and slipway and extend his jetty. Apparently Mr Adams did not realise he needed council approval as well. The neighbours were not satisfied.
To object to is the fact that he's going ahead and doing this work without approval, without notifying neighbours, without approval from the council in the very first instance, and for him to turn around and say he knows nothing about it, that's a lot of garbage.
He's a big businessman. He stated he didn't know that he had to lodge an application to council. He thought all his approvals were granted.
Oh, really?
Later, Mr Adams explained to me that the new boat ramp and slipway will not affect the environment and the foreshore will be restored.
In about 2 days the mess will be cleaned up and they will be quite happy and realise that we're not destroying environment, we rather love environment, and because I am a doctor of veterinary medicine, I love to preserve nature, and I don't want even the fish to be caught in here because they will be friendly fish, I'm sure.
The Wyong Council has asked Mr Adams to complete the earthworks as soon as possible and erect a cloth screen around the area to prevent siltation. The council will meet with Mr Adams on Wednesday to consider final approval of the development.
The allegations were made in today's Daily Telegraph after an informant rang the newspaper, giving details of the scam and named one of the prisoners involved. The informant claimed that the practice is widespread at the Cessnock Corrective Centre. The report says offenders apply for welfare benefits before going to jail. Accomplices then smuggle in papers for them to sign during contact visits to ensure that the payments continue while they're inside. This may go on for up to 12 months before a check is done. The spokesman for Corrective Services Minister John Acaster says that this practice is feasible, given that there is usually only 2 officers supervising hundreds of prisoners and their friends and relatives during these visits. Up until now, the State Corrective Services Department has not, as a matter of course, given a list of prisoners to the Social Security Department to check if they are still receiving the dole. But according to a spokesman for the Department of Social Security, that will soon change. He says investigations are going on in this area and the cross-checks of prisoners against welfare recipients may soon spread nationwide. Good afternoon, I'm Janelle Provost. Lindy Chamberlain spent her first night of freedom with well-wishers in Darwin after her surprise release from Berrima Jail yesterday afternoon. Mrs Chamberlain, who was convicted of the murder of her 9-week-old baby Azaria at Ayers Rock in 1980, has spent the past 3 years in jail. Yesterday, following the discovery of a baby's matinee jacket at Ayers Rock this week, the Northern Territory government announced Mrs Chamberlain's sentence would be remitted. An inquiry will be held, but Attorney General Marshall Perron says despite the outcome, Mrs Chamberlain would not be returning to jail. Meanwhile, overseas, Haiti's president for life, Jean-Claude Duvalier, has fled the country and sought exile in France. Duvalier was persuaded that there was very little alternative after the United States cut its $50 million a year funding to the Caribbean country. The people of Haiti took to the streets with jubilation and relief. There were a number of killings as the people sought revenge against the president's secret police. In the Philippines, confusion reigns as both President Marcos and his challenger Cory Aquino claim they have won the presidential election. There has been some violence and accusations of vote rigging. The result of the election isn't expected for some time. And now elections a little closer to home. The Liberal Party in Tasmania and the Labor Party in Western Australia both seem set to retain power as the voting continues in those states. Now to the weather, a very warm to hot day with winds from the northeast at 15 to 20 knots. Seas are slight and there's a high fire danger. We'll have details on these and more stories tonight on NBN News at 6.